They thought it was just another seat dispute. They thought the man in the grey hoodie was just an overbooked mistake that needed to be erased to make room for a VIP. They were wrong. Dead wrong. When the crew of Flight 808 forcibly removed Darius Blackwood from Seat 1A to accommodate a pompous hedge fund manager, they didn't realize they weren't just kicking off a passenger. They were declaring war on the man who could buy their entire existence with a single phone call. This isn't a fairy tale. This is the brutal, true story of how one moment of arrogance cost an airline its legacy, and how the ultimate revenge isn't a lawsuit, it's a hostile takeover. Buckle up, the turbulence is just beginning. The air inside the first-class cabin of Regent Airways Flight 808 smelled of lemongrass and expensive leather. It was a scent designed to whisper wealth to the 12 people fortunate enough to sit in the nose of the Boeing 777, bound from JFK to London Heathrow. Darius Blackwood adjusted the noise-cancelling headphones over his ears, leaning back into the plush upholstery of Seat 1A. He didn't look like the typical clientele of Regent's royal class. He wasn't wearing a bespoke Savile Row suit or a Patek Philippe watch. He was wearing a slate-grey cashmere hoodie, black joggers, and a pair of worn-in sneakers. At 34, Darius had the calm, observant eyes of a man who had seen the bottom and climbed his way to the stratosphere. But to the untrained eye, he looked like a tired graduate student, or perhaps an off-duty athlete. He wasn't either. Darius was the founder of Blackwood Capital, a private equity firm that had quietly become the majority shareholder in 3 of the largest tech infrastructure companies in Silicon Valley. He didn't like fame. He didn't do interviews. He preferred the shadows, where the real power moved. He just wanted to sleep. It had been a grueling week in New York, negotiating a merger that had kept him awake for 72 hours straight. "Excuse me." The voice was sharp, clipped, and dripping with a specific kind of condescension that Darius recognized instantly. He slid one ear cup off. "Yes?" Standing in the aisle was a flight attendant. Her name tag read, Patricia. She had a tight, frozen smile that didn't reach her eyes, and she was holding a tablet like a shield. Behind her, tapping his foot impatiently, stood a man who looked like he had been manufactured in a boardroom. He was older, perhaps 50, wearing a pinstripe suit that cost more than most cars, with a face flushed pink from either expensive scotch or high blood pressure. "Sir," Patricia said, her voice loud enough that several other passengers looked up from their champagne. "I'm afraid there has been an administrative error with your boarding pass. We need you to vacate this seat immediately." Darius blinked, his brain still foggy from exhaustion. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his ticket stub. "I don't think so. Seat 1A. I booked this 3 weeks ago. Full fare." Patricia didn't even look at the stub. She looked at the man behind her, then back at Darius, her eyes flicking over his hoodie with distaste. "As I said, sir, it's an error. The system double-booked the seat. This gentleman," she gestured to the pinstriped man, "is a Diamond Medallion member and a personal friend of the airline's CEO. Priority protocol dictates that, in the event of a conflict, he retains the seat." The man in the suit stepped forward, invading Darius's personal space. This was Alistair Covington. Darius didn't know him personally, but he knew the type. Old money. The kind of man who thought the world was a service industry, catering specifically to him. "Look, son," Covington said, his voice booming. "I have a meeting in London that determines the fate of 1,000 jobs. I need to rest. You look like you're just going on a backpacking trip. Take the voucher they're offering and move back to economy. Don't make this difficult." Darius felt a cold calm settle over him. It was the same feeling He got right before he dismantled a competitor's argument in a negotiation. He looked at Covington, then at Patricia. "I paid $12,000 for this seat," Darius said softly. "I'm not moving." Patricia's smile vanished. "Sir, if you do not vacate the seat voluntarily, we will be forced to involve security. The flight is fully booked. We have a seat in Economy Plus, row 34. It has extra legroom. That is our final offer." "I don't want extra legroom," Darius said, putting his headphones back on. "I want the seat I paid for." The tension in the cabin spiked. A woman in 2A, burying her face in a copy of the Wall Street Journal, peeked over the top. A tech CEO in 3F stopped typing on his laptop. Covington let out a scoff of disbelief. "Unbelievable. The entitlement of this generation. Do you know who I am? I'm Alistair Covington. I run Covington Steel. I spend $500,000 a year with this airline." Darius didn't respond. He closed his eyes. That was the wrong move. "Captain," Patricia called out, turning toward the cockpit. "We have a non-compliant passenger in 1A. The captain emerged a moment later. Captain Miller. He was a tall man with silver hair, looking every bit the authority figure. He didn't ask questions. He had clearly been briefed by Patricia already. He saw the wealthy-looking Covington standing, and the young black man in a hoodie sitting. The bias was instantaneous and subconscious, but it was there, heavy as lead. "Sir," Captain Miller said, leaning down, "you are delaying my aircraft. This is a federal offense. You are disrupting the flight crew. Get up. Now." "I am sitting in my assigned seat," Darius said, his voice steady, though his heart was beginning to hammer against his ribs. "I haven't raised my voice. I haven't threatened anyone. You are removing me because he pointed at Covington, thinks he's more important." "I don't have time for this," Covington snapped. "Get him off." Captain Miller nodded to Patricia. "Call Port Authority." The words hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Darius looked around the cabin. No one spoke up. They were all too afraid of losing their own comfort, or perhaps they agreed with Covington. Maybe they thought Darius really didn't belong there. "You're making a mistake," Darius said, his voice dropping an octave. He looked Captain Miller dead in the eye. "A very expensive mistake." "The only mistake," Covington sneered, finally sitting on the armrest of the seat across the aisle, "was thinking you could sit at the grown-ups' table." 10 minutes later, the humiliation was complete. 2 Port Authority officers, burly and sweating, marched down the aisle. They didn't ask for Darius's side of the story. They saw a young black man in a hoodie and a captain pointing a finger. That was all the probable cause they needed. "Let's go, buddy," the first officer said, grabbing Darius by the bicep. "I can walk," Darius said, shaking the hand off. "Don't touch me." "Then move," the officer barked. Darius stood up. He grabbed his leather duffel bag from the overhead bin. As he stood, he found himself face to face with Alistair Covington. The older man was smirking, already loosening his tie, preparing to take the seat Darius had warmed. "Have a safe flight," Covington whispered, mocking him. "Try the peanuts in coach. I hear they're delightful." Darius paused. He didn't scream. He didn't throw a punch. He reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and snapped a single, high-resolution photo of Alistair Covington's face. "Hey!" Covington shouted. "You can't do that!" "Public space," Darius said calmly. Then he turned to Patricia, who was standing with her arms crossed, looking triumphant. He looked at her name tag again. "Patricia. And Captain Miller. I'll remember." "Get him off the plane," Patricia shrieked, losing her composure. The officers shoved Darius forward. He stumbled slightly, catching himself on a seatback. The economy passengers watched in silence as he was paraded through the curtain, down the long aisle, and out the cabin door. He could feel the eyes on him. Judgment, pity, amusement. A teenager in row 12 was filming it on TikTok. A mother shielded her child's eyes as if Darius were a violent criminal. The jet bridge was cold. The air smelled of jet fuel and exhaust. "You're lucky we're not booking you," the officer said, as they dumped him back into the terminal gate area. "The airline is banning you from the flight. You can pick up your refund at the counter. Don't come back today." Darius stood in the middle of the terminal, his hoodie slightly askew, his dignity bruised, but his mind razor-sharp. He watched through the glass as the jet bridge retracted. He watched as the massive Boeing 777 pushed back from the gate. He stood there until the plane taxied away, disappearing onto the tarmac. Most people would have gone to the customer service desk to scream. Most people would have called a lawyer to file a discrimination suit that would drag on for 3 years and settle for a pitiful $50,000. Darius Blackwood was not most people. He walked over to a quiet corner of the departure lounge, near a massive window overlooking the runway. He sat down on the floor, ignoring the empty chairs, and placed his laptop on his knees. He opened it and connected to the airport Wi-Fi via his own encrypted VPN. He didn't open his email. He opened a Bloomberg terminal application. His fingers flew across the keyboard. He wasn't looking for a flight. He was looking up a ticker symbol, RGA, Regent Global Aviation. He scanned the data. Market cap, $12.4 billion. Stock price, $42.50. Current status, volatile due to looming union strikes and rising fuel costs. Regent was vulnerable. They were leveraged to the hilt, trying to expand their transatlantic routes to compete with the budget carriers. They were cash poor and asset heavy. Darius pulled out his phone. He dialed a number that very few people in the world possessed. It rang once. "This is Sterling," a voice answered. It was Julian Sterling, his chief broker, and the man who managed the liquid assets for Blackwood Capital. "Julian," Darius said, his voice devoid of emotion. "What's our liquidity position right now?" "We just closed the San Francisco deal. We're sitting on about $4 billion in liquid cash, with another $8 billion in accessible credit lines. Why? You want to buy an island?" "No," Darius said, watching Flight 808 lift off into the grey sky. "I want to buy an airline." There was a silence on the other end of the line. "Darius, you're joking. Margins in aviation are terrible. It's a money pit." "I'm not looking for a long-term investment, Julian. I'm looking for a correction, a hostile correction." "Darius, where are you?" "I'm at JFK. I just got kicked off a Regent Airways flight so Alistair Covington could have my seat." "Covington, the steel guy? He's leverage-heavy too, isn't he?" "He is. But focus on the airline. Regent is public. Who are the major shareholders?" "Give me a second. Vanguard has 8%. BlackRock has 6%. Wait. There's a holding company, Apex Ventures, looking to offload a 15% block. They've been trying to sell quietly for months to avoid a panic." "Buy it," Darius said. "The whole block? That's nearly $2 billion, Darius. You need board approval for that." "I am the board," Darius snapped. "Trigger the clause. Use the emergency reserve. Buy the Apex block. And then start buying every floating share you can get your hands on. I want a controlling interest by the time Flight 808 lands in London." "Darius, that's a 6-hour flight. To corner that much stock that quickly, the price will skyrocket. We'll bleed cash." "I don't care if we bleed," Darius said, his eyes cold as he watched the plane turn into a speck in the clouds. "I want to own the plane, Julian. I want to own the pilot. I want to own the seat Covington is sitting in. Do it. Call me when we hit 20%. He hung up. The passenger next to him, An elderly woman knitting a scarf looked at him concernedly. "Everything okay, dear? You look like you missed your flight." Darius turned to her, and for the first time in an hour, he smiled. It was a terrifying smile. "I didn't miss it, Mum," he said. "I'm just catching up." The first-class lounge at JFK was a sanctuary of glass and quiet wealth, a stark contrast to the chaotic terminal below. Darius didn't have a boarding pass anymore, but he did have an American Express Centurion card, the black card, which granted him access regardless of his flight status. The receptionist, a young woman named Sarah, looked at his hoodie, then at the heavy titanium card, and then back at his face. She didn't sneer like Patricia. She recognized the weight of the card. "Welcome in, Mr. Blackwood. Can I get you a private suite?" "Yes," Darius said. "And I need the strongest coffee you have." And privacy. Absolute privacy. Inside the glass-walled suite, Darius turned the space into a command center. He connected his laptop to the lounge's oversized monitor. On the screen, the financial world was waking up. The ticker for RGA, Regent Global Aviation, was blinking red. "Julian, update," Darius said into his headset. "We secured the Apex block." Julian's voice crackled, sounding breathless. "Cost us $1.8 billion. That puts you at 15%. We are officially the second largest shareholder." "Who is number one?" "Vanguard. They hold 18%, but they're passive. They don't vote on operations unless the ship is sinking. The board controls the rest through scattered proxies." "Get me to 25%, Darius ordered. "Start buying the floating shares. Aggressively. I want the price to jump. I want them to panic." "Darius, the price is already up 4% in 10 minutes. The algorithms are noticing the volume. CNBC is going to be talking about this within the hour. Regent's CEO, Jonathan Hilliard, is going to get a call." "Good," Darius said, leaning back, watching the numbers climb. "I want him to call me." 30 minutes later, the news broke. On the lounge TV, the Market Watch anchor adjusted his glasses. "Breaking news in the aviation sector. Heavy trading volume on Regent Global Aviation. Rumors of a hostile accumulation are swirling. The stock has jumped 12% in the last hour. Analysts are baffled. Regent has been underperforming for quarters. Who is buying?" Darius took a sip of his black coffee. His phone rang. It was an unknown number with a generic 223 New York area code. He let it ring 3 times. Power play. "This is Blackwood," he answered. "Mr. Blackwood?" A voice boomed on the other end. It sounded like gravel wrapped in velvet. "This is Jonathan Hilliard, CEO of Regent Airways. I believe you're currently holding a significant amount of my company's stock." 15%, Darius corrected, and climbing. "My broker tells me we just crossed the 19% threshold while the phone was ringing." There was a pause. Hilliard was a seasoned executive, a shark in his own right, but he sounded rattled. "Mr. Blackwood, we've met once, briefly, at the Davos summit. You're a tech investor, infrastructure. Why the sudden interest in a legacy carrier? If this is a corporate raid, I should warn you, we have defenses." "It's not a raid, Jonathan," Darius said, his voice calm, bordering on bored. "It's a customer service complaint. Excuse me? I was supposed to be on flight 808 to London this morning. Seat 1A, I paid full fare. But your staff decided to forcibly remove me to make room for a friend of yours, Alistair Covington." Silence stretched over the line. A long, heavy silence. You bought 19% of my airline because you got bumped?" Hilliard asked, his voice trembling with incredulity. "I didn't get bumped, Jonathan. I was humiliated. I was marched off by police like a criminal because your flight crew judged me by my hoodie and my skin color rather than my ticket. They valued Mr. Covington's comfort over my contract. So I decided that if I can't sit in seat 1A, I should probably own the seat, and the plane, and the terminal. "Mr. Blackwood, please," Hilliard stammered. "This is a misunderstanding. I can authorize a full refund. I can get you a private jet to London immediately. There is no need to destabilize the market cap of a Fortune 500 company over a seating error." "It wasn't an error. It was a choice," Darius said coldly. "And now I'm making a choice. I'm filing a 13D form with the SEC in 10 minutes, declaring my intent to take a controlling interest. I'm going to replace the board, Jonathan. And the first order of business will be a review of executive leadership." "You can't do that?" "I have $4 billion in cash and a line of credit that scares God," Darius said. "Watch me." "What do you want?" Hilliard's voice lost its bluster. He sounded defeated. He knew the numbers. He knew Regent was vulnerable. "I want you to call Flight 808, Darius said. "I want you to speak to Captain Miller, and I want you to explain to him exactly who he just kicked off his plane. The plane is over the Atlantic. They're at cruising altitude." "I know," Darius said, looking at the flight tracker on his screen. The little plane icon was just passing Nova Scotia. "Call him, or I keep buying until there's nothing left for you to be CEO of." 3 hours into the flight, the atmosphere in first class was serene. Alistair Covington was on his 3rd glass of single malt scotch. He had reclined seat 1A fully, stretching his legs out with a satisfied groan. The seat was comfortable, even more comfortable knowing he had taken it from someone else. It was a power trip, and Alistair was addicted to power. Patricia, the flight attendant, stopped by with a warm towel. "Is everything to your liking, Mr. Covington?" she asked, her voice sugary sweet. "Perfection, Patricia," Alistair said. "You handled that situation back in New York beautifully. The riffraff we have to deal with these days. Honestly, the airline should thank you." "We always prioritize our diamond members," she beamed. Captain Miller was happy to assist. At that moment, the fasten seatbelt sign chimed. It wasn't the soft ping of turbulence. It was a double chime, the crew signal. In the cockpit, Captain Miller was staring at the ACARS screen, the text messaging system pilots use to communicate with the ground. A message had just printed out from the thermal printer. Urgent. Priority 1. SATCOM call incoming. CEO Hilliard online. Pick up immediately. Miller frowned. The CEO never called the flight deck. Operations called. Dispatch called. But Jonathan Hilliard? "Center," Miller said to his co-pilot. "I need to take this on the private channel." He picked up the satellite phone handset. "This is Captain Miller. Flight 808. "Miller." The voice on the other end was distorted by the satellite connection, but the rage was crystal clear. "Did you remove a passenger named Darius Blackwood from the manifest prior to takeoff?" Miller blinked. Yes, sir. We had an overbooking situation. Mr. Covington arrived late, and per the VIP protocol." "VIP protocol?" Hilliard screamed. The sound peaked in Miller's earpiece. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" "Sir, the passenger was non-compliant. He was dressed inappropriately for first class and refused to— He is Darius Blackwood. He runs Blackwood Capital. And as of 10 minutes ago, he is the single largest shareholder of Regent Airways." Miller felt the blood drain from his face. His hands, usually steady enough to land a 300-ton aircraft in a crosswind, began to shake. I didn't know." "He bought the company, Miller. He is literally buying the airline out from under us right now because you kicked him off. The stock is going haywire. The board is calling for my head, and he wants to talk to you. He's there? He's patching through. Do not hang up. Do not make excuses. If you value your pension, you will listen to him." There was a click, a rush of static, and then a new voice filled the cockpit. It was calm, deep, and terrifyingly clear. "Hello, Captain Miller." Miller swallowed hard. His throat felt like it was filled with sand. "Mr. Blackwood." "I hope the flight is smooth," Darius said. "I'm currently watching your telemetry from the ground. Altitude 36,000 feet. Ground speed 540 knots. You're making good time." "Mr. Blackwood, I offer my sincerest apologies. If I had known—" "If you had known I was rich, you would have treated me with respect," Darius finished for him. "That's the problem, Captain. You shouldn't need to see a bank statement to treat a human being with dignity." "Sir, what can I do? We can offer you vouchers, flight credits." "I don't want credits," Darius said. "I own the credits now. I want you to deliver a message." "A message?" "Yes, to the man in seat 1A. "Mr. Covington." Miller looked back at the cockpit door. "You want me to tell him something?" "No," Darius said. "I want you to hand him the phone. I want to speak to him. Now." Miller hesitated. This was highly irregular. It was against protocol to bring a passenger into the communications loop, but the man on the phone effectively owned the plane. Protocol was whatever Darius said it was. I will bring the handset to him, sir." Miller stood up. He felt nauseous. He opened the cockpit door and stepped into the galley. Patricia looked up, smiling. "Captain, everything okay?" "Give me the extension cord for the sat phone," Miller said, his voice hollow. He walked into the first-class cabin. The passengers were resting. Alistair Covington was dozing, his mouth slightly open. Captain Miller tapped him on the shoulder. Covington startled awake, looking annoyed. "What? What is it?" "Turbulence." "Mr. Covington," Miller said, and everyone in the cabin could hear the tremor in his voice. "There is a phone call for you." Covington frowned. "A phone call? Up here? Who the hell is it?" "It's the owner of the airline," Miller said. Covington's eyebrows shot up. He straightened his tie, a smug grin spreading across his face. "Ah, Jonathan? He probably wants to apologize for the delay personally, or thank me for my loyalty. I told you, we're close." He took the handset from Miller, wiping his mouth. He pressed it to his ear, leaning back so the rest of the cabin could see how important he was. "Jonathan," Covington boomed, "you didn't have to call. The crew treated me fantastically, although that little disruption at the gate was unfortunate." "This isn't Jonathan," a voice said in his ear. Covington froze. The smile slid off his face like oil. He recognized that voice. It was the voice of the backpacking kid he had sneered at 3 hours ago. "Who is this?" Covington whispered. "Turn around, Alistair," Darius said. "Look at the captain. Look at his face." Covington looked up at Captain Miller. Miller looked like he was attending a funeral. He was pale, sweating, and staring at the floor. "I am the man whose seat you are sitting in," Darius said. "And as of this afternoon, I am the chairman of the board for Regent Airways. I just bought the majority stake, Alistair. I own the plane, I own the seat, I own the champagne you're drinking." This is a joke," Covington stammered, looking around. The other passengers were watching now. The tech CEO in 3F had taken his headphones off. "Check your email, Alistair," Darius said. "I believe your own company, Covington Steel, has a supplier contract with Regent for engine parts. A contract worth, what is it, 40 million a year?" "You can't touch that," Covington hissed, his hand gripping the phone so hard his knuckles turned white. "I just cancelled it," Darius said. "Effective immediately. We're switching to a supplier in Germany, and I've instructed my legal team to look into the quality control of your last shipment. If we find one microfracture, I'm suing Covington Steel for negligence. By the time you land in London, your stock will be trading for pennies." "You're crazy," Covington shouted, standing up. "You can't do this over a seat." "It wasn't just a seat," Darius said. "It was the principle. You told me to try the peanuts in coach. Well, Alistair, I hope you enjoyed the scotch, because it cost you $40 million. Darius hung up. The line went dead. Covington stood there, the phone pressed to his ear, hearing only the hollow hum of the satellite static. He looked at Captain Miller. "Is it true?" Covington asked, his voice barely a squeak. "Did he buy it?" Captain Miller nodded slowly. "Headquarters confirmed it. He controls the company." Covington's legs gave out. He collapsed back into seat 1A, not with the arrogance of a king, but with the heaviness of a man whose world had just evaporated. He looked at the champagne glass on his tray table. It didn't look like luxury anymore. It looked like poison. The remaining 3 hours of Flight 808 were the longest of Alistair Covington's life. The luxury he had fought so hard to secure had turned into a prison cell at 38,000 feet. The flight attendants, including Patricia, had vanished into the galley, too terrified to show their faces in the cabin. The other passengers in first class, who had previously looked at Covington with respect, now treated him like he was radioactive. They whispered behind their hands, casting glances at the man who had single-handedly provoked a corporate takeover. When the wheels finally screeched against the tarmac at Heathrow, there was no relief. The plane taxied to the gate, the engines whining down to a silence that felt heavy and suffocating. "Ladies and gentlemen," Captain Miller's voice came over the intercom. He sounded drained, his voice lacking its usual authority. "We have arrived at the gate. However, we have been instructed by ground operations to hold all passengers on board. Please remain seated." Murmurs of confusion rippled through the plane. Usually, the seatbelt sign would ding, and the rush to grab overhead bags would begin. Instead, the cabin remained locked. Through the window, Alistair saw something that made his stomach drop. It wasn't the usual baggage handlers or fuel trucks. 3 black Range Rovers had pulled up directly onto the tarmac, next to the jet bridge. A group of men and women in dark, sharp suits were standing by the door, flanking 2 uniformed London Metropolitan Police officers. The cabin door opened, but it wasn't the gate agent who stepped on. It was a woman in her 40s, wearing glasses and holding a tablet. She walked with the precision of a scalpel. This was Eleanor Sterling, the head of Blackwood Capital's London Legal Division. She walked straight past the trembling flight attendants and stood at the front of the first-class cabin. "Good morning," she announced, her British accent crisp and authoritative. "My name is Eleanor Sterling. I represent the new majority ownership of Regent Airways. We apologize for the delay in your disembarkation. We are instituting a new quality control protocol today." She looked down at a list on her tablet. "Mr. Alistair Covington?" Alistair shrank in his seat. "Yes?" "Please gather your belongings," Eleanor said. "You are to deplane first." Alistair stood up, trying to regain a shred of his dignity. He adjusted his jacket, shooting a glare at the other passengers. Finally, some sensible treatment. Clearly Darius has realized he can't treat a VIP like— "You are being escorted off," Eleanor interrupted, her voice ice-cold, "because British Customs and the Serious Fraud Office have been notified regarding irregularities in Covington Steel's international shipping manifests. Since you are the CEO, they would like a word. Immediately." Alistair's face went white. "What? That's preposterous." "Is it?" Eleanor countered. "Mr. Blackwood's audit team has been very busy the last 6 hours. It seems your company has been claiming tax exemptions on engine parts that don't exist. That is fraud, Mr. Covington." The 2 police officers stepped onto the plane. They didn't rough him up. They didn't shout. They simply stood there, waiting. "Shall we, sir?" one officer said. Alistair looked at Patricia. She looked away. He looked at Captain Miller, who was watching from the cockpit door. Miller closed the door. For the second time that day, a man was marched off Flight 808. But this time there was no sympathy. As Alistair was led down the aisle, a passenger in row 4, the same young man who had filmed Darius earlier, held up his phone. "Say cheese, Alistair," the kid quipped. Alistair lowered his head and walked into the jet bridge, straight into the custody of the authorities. Eleanor Sterling didn't leave. She turned to the rest of the cabin. "The rest of you may disembark. However," she turned her gaze to the flight crew, specifically Patricia and the purser. "The cabin crew is to remain on board for a mandatory performance review. The new management team is waiting in the galley." Patricia burst into tears. By the time Darius Blackwood walked out of the JFK lounge in New York, the sun was setting, but the internet was on fire. The video the teenager had recorded of Darius being shoved by Port Authority officers while Alistair Covington smirked in the background had been uploaded to TikTok with the caption, "Airline kicks off innocent guy for a rich jerk. Karma is coming." It had 4 million views in 3 hours. But then, the second wave hit. The financial news broke. Bloomberg, Reuters, and CNBC all ran the same headline. "Mystery buyer revealed. Tech mogul Darius Blackwood acquires Regent Airways in hostile takeover following seating dispute." The internet connected the dots instantly. The comment section exploded. "Wait, the guy in the hoodie is a billionaire. He bought the airline to fire the guy who took his seat. That is the ultimate flex. I will never fly another airline again. This man is a hero." Darius sat in the back of his chauffeured SUV, watching the stock prices on his phone. Regent Airways, RGA, was up 25%. The market loved the aggression. They saw it as a sign of strong, no-nonsense leadership. Covington Steel, on the other hand, was in freefall. The news of the cancelled contract and the investigation at Heathrow had spooked investors. The stock had plummeted 40% in a single afternoon. Alistair Covington wasn't just embarrassed. He was losing millions of dollars by the minute. Darius's phone buzzed. It was Jonathan Hilliard, the CEO of Regent. "Darius," Hilliard sounded exhausted. "I've seen the news. I've seen the stock price. The board is convening an emergency meeting via video conference in 20 minutes. They want to know your intentions." "My intentions are simple, Jonathan," Darius said, looking out the window at the Manhattan skyline. "I'm cleaning house." 20 minutes later, Darius joined the video call from his office in Midtown. The screen was filled with the faces of 12 anxious board members, mostly older men in expensive suits who looked terrified. "Gentlemen," Darius began, skipping the pleasantries, "I own 51% of this company as of closing bell today. We are going to make some changes." Mr. Blackwood, the chairman of the board, a man named Sterling, no relation to his broker, spoke up. "While we appreciate the influx of capital, your methods, they are unorthodox. You cannot run an airline based on personal vendettas." "It's not a vendetta," Darius said, leaning into the camera. "It's a culture correction. You have built a culture where a diamond card matters more than human dignity. That ends today." He pulled up a document on the shared screen. Item 1. Alistair Covington is banned for life from Regent Airways. His miles are seized and donated to charity. "Agreed," the chairman said quickly. "He's a liability now anyway." Item 2, Darius continued. "The crew of Flight 808. I am not firing them." The board members looked surprised. Hilliard blinked. "You're not?" "No," Darius said. "Firing them is the easy way out. If I fire them, they go to another airline and treat passengers the same way. I want them retrained. Specifically, I want Patricia and Captain Miller reassigned to the regional hopper fleet. They will work the red-eye shift from North Dakota to Winnipeg. Economy cabins only. No assistants. No first-class service. They will serve peanuts and water for the next 2 years until they learn what it feels like to be the little guy. A silence fell over the virtual room. It was a punishment worse than termination. It was a complete stripping of status. "Item 3, Darius said, his voice softening but carrying more weight. "We are changing the dress code policy. If a passenger pays for a seat, they sit in it. I don't care if they are wearing a tuxedo or a trash bag. If we judge our customers by their appearance, we deserve to go bankrupt." "Mr. Blackwood," Hilliard said, "these are drastic operational changes." "I have one more change, Jonathan," Darius said. "What is it?" "You. You authorized the policy that allowed this to happen. You built the system that made Patricia think it was okay to humiliate a customer." Hilliard swallowed hard. "I have served this company for 20 years. "And you've done a fine job making money," Darius said. "But you've lost the plot on service. You're stepping down as CEO, Jonathan, effective immediately." "You can't do that." "I have the votes. It's done. You'll receive a generous severance package, provided you sign a non-disparagement agreement. But you are out." Darius closed the laptop, ending the call. The room went silent. He walked over to the window. He was tired. He had spent billions of dollars in less than a day. He had toppled a CEO, destroyed a steel magnate, and reshaped a major airline. But he still hadn't gotten to London. He picked up his phone and called his pilot. "Get the Gulfstream ready. I have a meeting in London tomorrow morning." "Yes, Mr. Blackwood. Shall I file a flight plan for Heathrow?" "No," Darius smiled. "File it for Luton. I don't want to cause a scene." He paused, then added, "And make sure the hoodie I packed is clean." "I'm wearing it." 3 months later, the landscape of the aviation industry had shifted tectonically. The takeover of Regent Airways wasn't just a financial transaction, it was a cultural exorcism. In the weeks following the JFK incident, Darius Blackwood had spent 16 hours a day inside the company's headquarters, dismantling the old guard piece by piece. He hadn't just fired the CEO, he had purged the entire executive suite of anyone who viewed passengers as cattle. The stock price, which had initially wobbled due to the uncertainty, had stabilized and then soared to an all-time high of $78 a share. But the numbers on the ticker were secondary to what was happening on the ground. Darius sat in the back of a black town car, weaving through the rainy streets of London toward Heathrow. On his tablet, he was reviewing the latest customer dignity metrics, a new KPI he had forced the board to adopt. Complaints regarding staff rudeness had dropped by 94%. On-time departures were up, but the metric he cared about most was repeat bookings from economy passengers. That number had tripled. He swiped to the newsfeed. The face of Alistair Covington filled the screen. The headline was stark. "Covington guilty. Steel tycoon convicted on 12 counts of fraud." Darius tapped the video to watch the report. The footage showed the exterior of the Old Bailey. A chaotic swarm of paparazzi flashed their cameras as Alistair emerged. He looked like a ghost of the man who had sat in Siat 1A 3 months ago. His bespoke suit hung loosely on his frame. His face was gaunt and grey, and his eyes darted around with the paranoia of a hunted animal. The reporter's voiceover was merciless. Alistair Covington, once a titan of British industry, was found guilty today of massive tax fraud, embezzlement, and corporate negligence. The investigation, which began after an abrupt cancellation of his contracts by Regent Airways, unraveled a decade-long scheme of falsified safety records and shell companies. Covington faces a minimum of 15 years in prison. His assets have been frozen, and Covington Steel has filed for bankruptcy liquidation. Darius watched the man stumble into a police van. There was no triumph in Darius's eyes, only a cold sense of balance. Alistair had believed his status made him untouchable. He had believed the rules didn't apply to him because he had a platinum card and a loud voice. He had been wrong. Darius closed the tablet as the car pulled up to Terminal 5. "We're here, Mr. Blackwood," the driver said. "Shall I call the VIP concierge to escort you through the side entrance?" Darius looked at the rain-slicked pavement and the bustling crowds pushing trolleys toward the sliding doors. "No," Darius said. "Drop me at the main curb. I'll walk in like everyone else." He stepped out into the cool London air. He wasn't wearing a suit. He was dressed in a fresh charcoal hoodie, dark jeans, and clean sneakers. It was the exact same outfit he had worn the day he was kicked off the plane, a silent nod to the event that started it all. Inside the terminal, the atmosphere was different. It was subtle, but palpable. The Regent Airways check-in counters had been redesigned. The imposing, fortress-like desks were gone, replaced by open podiums that removed the physical barrier between staff and passengers. Darius walked toward the security checkpoint. He noticed something new hanging above the Regent check-in zone. It was a massive digital banner displaying a simple manifesto. "Respect is the currency of this airline. Spend it wisely." He made his way through security, opting for the standard line rather than the fast track, and walked toward the departure lounge. He wanted to see his investment in the wild. He wanted to see if the memo had actually reached the front lines. As he approached Gate A14, where Flight 808 to New York was preparing to board, he heard a commotion. The sound of a raised voice cut through the hum of the terminal. It was a sound Darius knew well, the sound of entitlement. "I don't care what the computer says," a man was shouting. "I am a global elite member. I have flown more miles this year than you will in your entire life. I demand you let me carry this bag on." Darius slowed his pace, blending into the crowd near the gate. He watched the scene unfold. The shouter was a man in his 50s, red-faced and sweating, wearing a trench coat that screamed money. He was berating the gate agent, a young man named Leo, who couldn't have been more than 22. The passenger's carry-on was clearly oversized, a hard shell case that wouldn't fit in the overhead bin of a cargo plane, let alone a passenger jet. In the old days, 3 months ago, Leo would have crumbled. He would have apologized, bowed his head, and gate-checked someone else's bag to make room for the bully. He would have been terrified of a complaint letter. But today, Leo stood straight. He wasn't aggressive, but he wasn't submissive. He looked the man in the eye. "Sir," Leo said, his voice calm and amplified slightly by the acoustics of the desk. "I respect your status with the airline. We value your business. However, I cannot respect your tone." The man froze, stunned. "Excuse me?" "The bag is too large," Leo explained, gesturing to the sizing bin. "It affects the safety and comfort of the other passengers, and shouting at me will not change the physics of the aircraft bins. You have 2 choices. I can check the bag for you right now, free of charge, or we can rebook you on a later flight when you have calmed down." The crowd at the gate went silent. People stopped scrolling on their phones. They were witnessing something rare, a frontline worker standing their ground with dignity. The businessman spluttered, his face turning a deeper shade of crimson. You can't talk to me like that. I'll have your job. I know the Vice President of Operations." Leo didn't flinch. He reached under the counter and pulled out a small, laminated card. He slid it across the desk toward the angry man. "Actually, sir, the new policy comes directly from the chairman, Darius Blackwood. Here is the customer support line for his office. You are welcome to call and explain that you missed your flight because you refuse to follow safety regulations and abused a staff member. The name Darius Blackwood hit the man like a bucket of ice water. Everyone knew the story. Everyone knew what happened to the last guy who tried to pull rank on this airline. The man looked at the card, then at his bag, and finally at Leo's unwavering expression. The fight left him. He deflated, his shoulders slumping. "Fine," the man muttered, shoving the bag forward. "Check it." "Thank you, sir," Leo said, his smile returning instantly, genuine and professional. "Here is your claim tag. Boarding will begin in 10 minutes. Darius watched from the back, a small, satisfied smile playing on his lips. He didn't intervene. He didn't need to. The culture was self-policing now. "Flight 808 to New York is now boarding," the announcement chimed. "We invite our first-class passengers and active military personnel to board at this time." Darius waited until the line thinned out before walking up to the podium. When he reached the front, Leo looked up, still flushed with the adrenaline of the confrontation. "Good morning, sir," Leo said brightly. "Passport and boarding pass, please." Darius handed them over. Leo scanned the pass, and his eyes widened. He looked at the screen, then back at Darius. He took in the hoodie, the jeans, and the face he had seen on the internal company memos. Mr. Blackwood," Leo stammered, straightening his tie. I didn't know you were observing." "I wasn't observing, Leo," Darius said softly. "I was just traveling." "But that?" He gestured toward the angry man walking down the jet bridge. "That was excellent. You handled him perfectly." Leo let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for 5 minutes. "Thank you, sir. It's easier now. Knowing we have backup. Knowing we won't get fired for doing the right thing." "You'll never get fired for demanding respect," Darius said. "Keep it up." Darius took his boarding pass and walked down the jet bridge. The tunnel felt different this time. It didn't feel like a chute processing livestock. It felt like an entry into a space he controlled, a space he had purified. He stepped onto the plane. The lighting in the first-class cabin had been changed from the sterile, cold, fluorescent white to a warmer, amber hue. The air smelled of citrus and basil. He walked to row 1. Seat 1A was empty, waiting for him. Darius placed his duffel bag in the overhead bin, the same bin he had been forced to empty 3 months ago. He sat down. The leather was cool and yielding. He stretched his legs out. "Good morning, Mr. Blackwood." The voice was tentative, barely a whisper. Darius turned. Standing in the aisle, holding a tray with a hot towel and a glass of sparkling water, was Patricia. She looked different. The heavy makeup she used to wear, the mask of the perfect flight attendant, was toned down. Her uniform was immaculate, but her posture was humble. She wasn't the purser anymore. That rank had been stripped. She was working the cabin, serving, doing the hard work. She had spent 8 weeks on the penance routes, the grueling red-eye flights from North Dakota to Winnipeg, dealing with blizzards, delays, and angry commuters in economy. Darius had received weekly reports on her. She hadn't quit, she hadn't complained, she had done the work. Now, she stood before the man she had humiliated, holding a glass of water. Her hands were shaking slightly. "Hello, Patricia," Darius said, his voice neutral. I brought your water, sir. No ice. Just how you prefer it." Darius looked at the glass, then up at her eyes. He saw fear, yes, but he also saw recognition. She knew now that the uniform didn't make her better than the people she served. "Thank you," Darius said, taking the glass. Patricia lingered for a moment. She looked like she wanted to run back to the galley, but she forced herself to speak. "Mr. Blackwood," she started, her voice cracking. I wanted to say The last 3 months. They were hard. The hardest of my life. Darius took a sip of water, watching her. I imagine they were. But, she continued, tears pricking the corners of her eyes, I learned that I had forgotten what this job is actually about. I got so used to the status, to the power, that I stopped seeing the people. I'm sorry. Not just because you're the boss, but because what I did was wrong. It was the apology he hadn't received that day in New York. It was genuine. Darius set the glass down. He looked at seat 1B, the empty seat next to him, where Alistair Covington would have sat. Then he looked back at Patricia. Apology accepted, Patricia, Darius said. You're still here. You didn't quit. That means something. It means you're ready to be part of the new regent. Thank you, sir, she whispered. Now, Darius said, shifting into a more relaxed position. I believe we have a flight to catch. Let the captain know I'm strapped in. And Patricia? Yes, sir. Make sure the passengers in economy get the same hot towel service today. Everyone gets one. On me. Patricia stared at him. Then a small, genuine smile broke through her nervousness. Yes, sir. I'll make sure of it. She walked away, heading toward the back of the plane to prep the cabin. Darius leaned his head back against the headrest. The cabin door closed with a solid, reassuring thud. The engines began to whine, a low vibration building in the floorboards. He closed his eyes. He thought about the billions he had spent. He thought about the legal battles, the board meetings, the sleepless nights. He thought about Alistair Covington sitting in a holding cell, stripped of his pinstripes. Most people would say it was too much effort for a seat. Most people would say it was petty. But as the plane pushed back from the gate and began its taxi toward the runway, Darius Blackwood finally felt the one thing money usually couldn't buy. He felt peace. He wasn't just a passenger anymore. He was the pilot of his own destiny. And this time, nobody was going to tell him to move. And that is the story of how one man turned a moment of disrespect into a multi-billion-dollar lesson in humility. Darius Blackwood didn't just get his revenge. He changed the system. It's a brutal reminder that you never know who you're talking to, and that true power isn't about how loud you shout. It's about what you can do when you whisper. What do you think? Did Alistair Covington deserve 15 years in prison, or was Darius too harsh? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this deep dive into billionaire revenge and corporate justice, smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a story. Until next time, fly safe and be kind. You never know who's sitting in 1A.